Okay, you should now be able to hear me. Let's get the code editor in there as well. Yep. Hope the text is readable. And I'm already getting great feedback on the chat. People are saying the sound is great. Okay. Welcome to another quarantine live stream. Still in quarantine. That's the deal with quarantines. They last for a bit. And I guess this is my 4th day in quarantine. And this is the 2nd quarantine live stream. I'm doing good. I'm not sick, so don't worry about me. But this is a terrifying time, I think, for a lot of people, and especially for not especially, I guess, but at least for artists, it's kind of scary because you're losing, especially freelancers are losing their income, and what's the future going to hold? We don't really know at the moment, but once all of this is over, there's going to be a newly found demand for computer music, of course. So to make sure that we can meet that demand, we are going to collectively do a bit of coding in SuperCollider. What else can I say? Well, yeah, I guess a couple of things. The last stream I did ended very abruptly. It was just simply cut off. I don't know why or how. It just was. Maybe because, I don't know. Maybe because YouTube was looking in and thinking, well, this isn't going anywhere. We might as well stop here. But anyway, it just stopped yesterday, and hopefully it won't just stop today. But we never know. But at any rate, it's probably not because of an electric shortage or anything like that. Another thing I realized yesterday was, first of all, of course, I have the noisiest keyboard in the world, and it's because I'm such a huge nerd. I have a mechanical keyboard that says clack, 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 which someone noticed yesterday sounds pretty insane on if you're at home listening on studio monitors, I guess. But what can I say? It's what we have to work with here. It's the setup I have. And it's not exactly Hollywood quality production we're doing here. This is literally set up on my ironing board in my bedroom, and which is my studio and my office and my live stream, TV, YouTube, whatever, as well. So it's all a bit improvised. And the same goes for the actual contents of these streams. I'm not really preparing anything. I've prepared what I think would be a fun theme. But apart from that, I haven't really prepared anything. So pedagogically, what we're doing here is kind of dodgy, I guess. But hopefully it's going to be a lot of fun. I've kind of thought a bit about what to do in these live streams. And oh yeah, by the way, I have no idea as well how long this live stream is going to be. Yesterday it was cut off after about an hour. Maybe it's going to be an hour today. Maybe I only have content for about 30 minutes. I don't know. But we'll see. We'll take it as it comes. Maybe I'll run into a bug and spend a lot of time on that. We never know. So if you're if you need to make dinner for your kids in 1 hour or something like that, I can't guarantee I'm done in an hour, but maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. We'll just have to see. But of course, if you get tired of looking at me and listening to me, just log off. And at some point when this video is uploaded, you can go back and watch the ending. I'm not judging you if you do that. It's all good. What else can I say? Oh yeah, I have. I realized as well. I was looking back at this video from the last stream, and I realized that I have quite a heavy way of breathing, and that's just my normal way of breathing. So apologies for that. I guess if this was a professional setup of any kind, then maybe you wouldn't have a presenter who was doing heavy breathing. But here I am. That's what we've got to work with here, and yeah, that's how the cards are dealt. So I hope that people are doing relatively okay out there. I'm thinking, why not just get straight into it. Here I have my code editor. I didn't really say that yesterday, but I'm using an alternative code editor called NeoVim with a plugin called SCN Vim, which allows you to use to work with SuperCollider very nicely. So, and all of this kind of stuff is linked in the description to this video. So if you're curious about that, you can just go ahead and click on those links, and then hopefully you'll get a bit more information. But anyway, for this stream today and the following stream, if I'm doing any more streams, I'd like to reserve the space and time to show some things that you probably normally wouldn't see in a tutorial, or it would get overlooked, or it's not an integral part of learning SuperCollider or whatever, but things that really make it a lot more fun and a lot easier to work with SuperCollider. So let's use this strange time in society and explore some things that normally would be glossed over, I guess. And I guess the kind of like the main thing about all of these themes that I choose is that they're kind of like things where when I realized these things, and it just opened up my way of working in SuperCollider completely. So that's the sentiment behind my choices here, and hopefully you will it will blow your mind a bit as well. So today I'm gonna talk about something extremely non-mind-blowing, I guess, which is GUIs. GUIs in SuperCollider was something that I carefully avoided for many years, because once I started using SuperCollider, I tried it for a bit and I found it to be absolutely horrifying. It's pixel pushing, moving things about, and just very confusing. And after a few years, I realized this one trick that I'm going to show you today. And once you start using this trick, it just becomes so much more simple. And that's why I wanted to show you guys this today. So a simple, relatively simple at least, way of making a GUI application in SuperCollider. That's the theme for today. And also I'm going to try and drink a large French press of coffee before this is over, and yeah, maybe I'll just have an explosive energy level at the end of this, but let's go into it. So we want to make a GUI application, and just a quick warning here. GUIs, well, not warning, but note, the goal isn't here to make a pretty GUI. We're not gonna make something that looks like a flashy new VST plugin that you bought from somewhere for thousands of dollars, and it has amazing animations and it's GPU powered, and things are flashing, or they look really realistic. It looks like an actual compressor or whatever. That's not what we're getting into here. The general aesthetic for the default GUI in SuperCollider is gray, and I guess it just kind of looks like something in between Windows 1995 and Windows 98. And so whether or not you like that, that's up to you. I personally, first of all, don't care how the GUI looks, and second of all, I've started to like the default look of the GUIs in SuperCollider, as you will see in a minute. So let's make a GUI application. Yeah, so first of all, we're going to make the GUI itself, and then after making the GUI, we will create some kind of small program that we will control with the GUI. And I think that's the goal here for today. So to create a GUI, we start by making a window using the window class. And you won't immediately see anything because we need to say w.front. So the window is in this variable called w, and if we go front, we see the window. Or at least I can see the window here. Let's see if you can actually see. You can see the window, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna remove it again. That's the window. What we want to do is perhaps have something that has a few sliders and a few buttons. So what I'm going to do is at the beginning of this code block, I'm going to make a variable called num sliders and set it to what would be reasonable. Let's say 4 sliders. We want our GUI to have 4 sliders, and as well, let's make a variable called num buttons. And we want 2 buttons. We want one button which will start the program or the process that we are controlling, and one which will make it stop. So let's go ahead and create these objects. So the sliders, I'm going to put in a variable called sliders, and I'm going to make at the same time a variable called buttons. And I see that people on the live stream are already getting really excited about aesthetics. Yes, this is all about computer music aesthetics. And someone says very precisely, it looks a lot like Minesweeper, but better. And I think that's very precise. Okay, we have 2 empty variables here called sliders and buttons, and these will contain our sliders and buttons. So sliders, we're going to set to equal num sliders, and so we're going to make we're going to do something. We're going to do what's it called in SuperCollider? I guess a process. A collection process or something like that. I just made that up. Maybe that's the word for it, maybe it's not. Now it is. So we're going to create all of our sliders using this one piece of code. So this is equal to 4. So 4.collect. And so this process inside of this bracket, this function will run 4 times because that's what we said here, and then it will return a slider. So that's it for now. We're going to do the same with buttons. Buttons equals num buttons dot collect. And then say button.new, and that should, oh, I'm very inconsistent here. Actually don't need this. This should be all we need for our buttons and our sliders. So we've now created the buttons and the sliders. We're not doing anything with them yet, and we actually haven't placed them in our GUI program yet. So remember, a couple of minutes ago, I showed you this window, this ugly gray window that I made, and that's the destination of all of these things. we're going to put all of them in the window. And now this is the trick that kind of changed my whole the way I look at GUIs in SuperCollider, or at least the way I work with them. We're going to make use of two classes called VLayout and HLayout. I'm going to put this as parentheses. This is where the magic happens. So if I open up HLayout in my documentation, there it is. See documentation of superclass line layout for details. Okay. This is an abstract superclass of HLayout and VLayout, which distribute views in a horizontal or vertical line, respectively. Each item can be assigned a stretch factor and an alignment flag to fine-tune how its size and position are managed, etc., etc. So, what this actually means is that we get a kind of responsive layout of our GUI objects if we use these two classes, VLayout and HLayout. And that's what really makes this such a pleasant way of working on GUIs. Because we don't have to calculate the width of each GUI object and what happens if the user resizes the window, blah blah blah. This is all done for us automatically here. So we're gonna just make a layout. I'm gonna make a variable here called layout. So the layout, we will say, is a VLayout. And we can see down here at the bottom it says .new expects items. So these are our GUI items. I'm gonna put in, just to begin with, I'm gonna put in the sliders. And if I just did it like this, nothing would happen. And that's because there's a bit of syntactic sugar we need to use here. We need to unfold this array that we made with the sliders. And we do that with this asterisk or star, or whatever you want to call it. Actually, I'm gonna rename this layout and say this is called slider layout. And then I'm gonna make another one called button layout. The button layout H layout. We're gonna put it in an H layout just so we can see the difference. Buttons. And we're actually almost done here. So we now have our two groups of objects, the sliders and the buttons. They're each laid out by themselves. And so we're gonna make the actual layout. Let's call this variable just layout. So the layout, the total final layout, the final layout will be, we can put these two layouts inside of another layout. So I'm gonna put them in an H layout and say slider, no, I'm gonna put the button layout first and then slider layout second. So this is the final layout. And if we were to evaluate this, nothing would happen, or it would look very strange. And that's because we need to put this layout somewhere. And a good place to put it is in the window. So we say W, that's the window, dot layout equals layout. So hopefully we have a GUI here. Yeah. It's a very chaotic looking, strange looking GUI because all of this has been laid out for us, and I actually completely mistook which was which. So I have this thing where I can't remember the difference between what is vertical and what is horizontal. So I made a mistake here, but it looks like it's working. But I just want to change it around just quickly here. So we want this to be vertical, right? And then this vertical as well. Boy, I'm quite incompetent. Yeah, this is what I would expect. And let me just make it a bit more smaller. Actually, the sliders, let's put them in an H layout, like this. Yeah. So here we go. We have a small GUI now, and it contains a button, a second button, slider, another slider, a third slider, and a fourth slider. So, and as you noticed, when I resize this window, the whole thing resizes. This is quite useful, at least in my opinion. It may look ugly like this, but it's possible to do, and I think that's cool because it depends. It all depends on what's the size of your screen, and you know, maybe the end user of this program that you're making wants to do something else than you imagine. Then you know, it's kind of nice to be able to resize the whole thing. So you see here, it's pretty flexible. But right now it doesn't really do anything. We just have these objects, and they are laid out rather nicely, I would say. This is, well, actually this is the whole secret. That's all there is to it. But let's just go a bit further here. I want to change the buttons a bit. So the first buttons. So buttons is a array, and we're gonna index into that array, if I can, there it is. And say the first button, which has the index 0, I'm gonna set the string of it. Now I need to look up the help file here because I can never remember. Yeah, so a button is a multi-state button. That's important to remember. Yeah, so the button object has states. So it could have an on state or an off state. We're gonna just keep it simple, and just each button has one state. So you just press them and something happens. And if you've never coded GUIs before, then already now you might be asking yourself, what the hell is this? There's an underscore here and then something in the parentheses. So this is syntax that you see quite often in when working with GUIs in SuperCollider, but you don't see it often outside of GUIs. And it's simply, you see here that there's a method called states. You see it in up here in the help file, .states. And we can either say equals states, like this, start, or we can do it like this, like they do in the help file, which is, I think, the more common way of doing it. Like this. So the underscore is simply, and the parentheses is simply a different way of writing equals and then something. And the reason people do this is that often with GUIs and GUI objects, you need to access a lot of different methods and variables inside of this one object, and it just looks ugly if you do it on separate lines, I guess. So what you see most often is that it looks like this. So you have the object, and then on the next line, dot something, which is the method or the variable, and then underscore, and then set it to something. And another thing I should probably explain here is that the states of the button are in a multi-dimensional array here, and it just has to be. So I could say another state here, say weird. Let's call it weird. So this would be another state. It's just so you can see the logic of all of this. And if I then go, boop, yeah. Wonder if you're able to see it. No, you're not. Okay. How about now? Yeah, there it is. big fat GUI. So here you see at the top is the button where it says start. It's up here. I press it and it says weird. And you can even change the color, as you see here in the help files. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep it simple. And so that was the first button. First button. And then second button. We're going to just copy all of this. 0, 1, stop. Okay. So this should now give us labels saying start and stop on the two respective buttons in our little GUI here. And so we're getting closer here, but still we need this GUI program to do something. And the way you do something with GUIs in SuperCollider is that you attach actions to the GUI objects. So an action is called every time you interact with a GUI object. So when I press this button on my GUI, the action it contains is called. And that goes for all of these GUI objects. And to make this clear, let's make our own little actions here. So I'm going to go back up here and say for the sliders, for all of these sliders, I'm going to add an action using this funky syntax that I just showed you. So action.action underscore parentheses, and then we add in a function like this. So all of our sliders will contain this action now, and we're going to add an argument. The first argument that we get in the action is the object. So this is the slider itself, and this is really great because we get access to it inside of this action every time the slider is touched. So we can say object dot value, and this will give us the current value of the slider. And let's post line this so we can see in the terminal what's going on. And let's do the same for the buttons as well. Okay. Gonna shut down this. Reload the GUI. I made a mistake. Opening bracket. Start. Okay. Let's check this out. Here's an opening bracket. Oh yeah, it's one bracket too many. And the same here. Let's try again. Yeah, there it is. So let me just resize this. Okay. And now if I clear the post window, there it is. Hopefully you will be able to see something happening when I touch these objects. This is the slider. This is the first slider, the second slider, third, and fourth. And then you notice the values by default go from 0.0 to 1.0. So that's very handy. All right. And so this is what we're going to use to control our little process. And so the question is, what process are we going to control? Well, I thought about this. I would be lying if I said I thought about this for a while, because I didn't. I just thought about this immediately before doing this live stream. And I'm thinking the easiest, at least to me, the easiest thing or most fun thing we could do right now is to create a pattern. So we're going to make a pattern which, if you're not familiar with it, it's going to be a kind of sequence of sound events that will play. And we will be able to control it using our newly made and really nicely looking, I have to say, GUI here. So let's make a pattern. And if you were here for the last quarantine live stream, then you will remember that we were working with an ndef, which is a a thing that lets you live code a sound process, basically. And in here we're going to use a pdef, which is the same, but for patterns. So we want to be able to live code a pattern. So the pattern I'm going to call, let's call it a quarantine. And then I'm going to put in a pbind, and a pbind is the one doing all of the work here, actually. Okay. And that's the actual pattern here. So we're going to put in a parameter called duration, set it to, I don't know, 1.125, and just to be able to test it, let's add in a scale degree. So when we do this, it's going to play a major scale, C major, I guess, something. I'm not very good at music theory, so the music theory nerds out there may be sharpening their knives when they hear me say obvious bullshit like that. But yeah, what do I know? It's all numbers to me. It's all data. So let's just put in p white. So I'm sorry if this is kind of above your head, because this is kind of a tutorial in self patterns in SuperCollider, but I'm just gonna keep it simple and just say that this is a sequence that plays at every 0.125 beats, and it's gonna play a random scale degree between 0 and 10. So that's all you need to know for now. Let's see. Yeah, you get the sound. And I guess this sounds like some kind of music. And so if you noticed, I already used a method here called .play. So I'm thinking this is what we want to use to play this pattern in using our GUI. So if I evaluate this again, you can see there's one called stop as well, which not surprisingly will make the whole thing stop. And if we say play, it's gonna make it play again. So let's go back up and say for the first button, oh boy. Yeah, the first button, we're gonna add a action. And let's just clean this up a bit. And the first parameter here, the first argument is obviously the object, like I said before. And before I forget it, I'm gonna go back here and delete this one. So that if you didn't catch that, that was the previous action, which would just post the value of the button. Okay, where was I? Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So the start button, we want to start and stop this pattern. We called it quarantine, I think. No, I spelled it wrong. Quarantine. Quarantine. Yeah. Hopefully that's correct. And so that's one of the neat things about using pdef to store our patterns, is that we can access it anywhere in our program. So once it's defined, it's available to us in here inside of this button. And so when you press this button, we want it to say play this pattern called quarantine. And I'm going to copy this down here. Make sure that I don't have too many semicolons. And then for the stop button, not surprisingly, I'm going to say .stop. So let's see if this actually works now. Did we get any errors? Nope, looks good. And I'm scrolling back and forth a bit here because I just want to make sure that you're able to actually see what I'm doing. I'm using this super Linux thing called i3, which is my window manager. So whenever I make a new window, it's just very large. At least it seems large in OBS. But anyway, that's besides the point. Let's just press start here. and then stop. Yeah. So our little GUI here is now able to start and stop our little pattern. Okay. And I see that my stream is still running. That's good. Okay, so what are we going to do about these sliders then? That's pretty boring. They don't do anything right now. It would be fun if they could change some things in the pattern. So let's make some processes to change things in the pattern. Here I'm going to introduce another pattern class that's which is beside the kind of like, it's beyond the scope of this one, but just trust me, it's a good one. So pdef is used for event patterns mainly, and so we will store compositions and sections of compositions inside of these pdef classes. But there's an equivalent for the parameters inside of classes called pdef_n, and I'm gonna use it right now, because using pdef_n we can set things to a certain value from outside of the pattern, which is really great when we're working with the GUI here. So I'm gonna make it pdef_n, and like with the pdef, I wanted to give it a name. Let's call it qdir for quarantine duration, and then a default value of 1.25 beats. I'm gonna do the same here for the degree. I'm gonna say qdeg. This is the scale degree, and I'm gonna set it to 0, which is a C, I guess. And I'm gonna make another key here called octave, qoct. This will set which octave we're playing in. And then finally, maybe let's set the amplitude. So pdef_n qamp. This should not be 4 by default, but 0.5. Okay, so let's just evaluate this to see that it still works. It still works. It's a bit deeper and it's only playing one note. Let's just raise this octave. Yeah, this is equivalent to the octave that we had before. So right now it's just bum 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 bum. It's just droning there, but we want, of course, to change it. So what we have here are 4 pdef_ns. These can be changed from outside of this pattern. They all have a default value, and I know it looks a bit confusing, but it's actually pretty neat. So let's go back up here and actually add these actions for our sliders. Start button, I'm just gonna do a bit of housework here. Start button, stop button. Oh, God. And now I'm gonna delete this action, the default action for our sliders, and then instead I'm gonna say for each slider, I'm gonna define the process. So slider actions, sliders. See, the thing they don't tell you about mechanical keyboards is that they don't actually make you type more correctly. You just type louder. So I actually think that on an average I'm making more typing mistakes than I would usually. But it feels good, and it's kind of calming and soothing to listen to this click-clack of this old school sounding keyboard. To me, at least. Maybe to someone else it's just sound terror. I don't know. So the first slider, we're going to give an action like this, and then object is the first parameter. Like this, and we're going to repeat this 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So slider 1, 2, and slider 3. Oh boy. Slider 3 and 4. Okay. Each of these are going to change the one of these parameters. So we made one pdfn called qdir, so that's going to be the first slider. And the thing about durations in patterns, and this is super important, if you've never worked with patterns before, this one thing that you need to know, which is the one thing that's dangerous in patterns, is that it should never, ever, ever, ever reach 0 or something around 0 in the duration values, because then the whole thing will crash. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, we're going to convert the value of the object's slider and put it inside of a variable called val. So we're going to say val equals object value, and then we're going to scale this. So using this lin method, so from a linear scale to a linear scale, and the linear scale we're scaling it from is from 0.0 to 1.0, and let's say we change it so that at the bottom of the slider it's at 0.05, and then the top of the slider is 1 beat. Okay. Scale the duration. Make sure it is not 0. Okay. You see, that's a good example of the many mistakes that I make here. And I see people are still online, people are still doing good, having fun, the lulling. And someone said, Mads, why have you changed back to the default synth-def sound? That someone is Daniel. And that's because I used to have this slightly more edible default sound in the patterns. I don't know what happened. It's just disappeared. It's not intentional. But yeah, I'm sorry. You'll have to bear with me. I'm not making a very good case for SuperCollider here, am I? Like 90s looking GUIs and strange piano sound simulations. This isn't giving you an impression of a tool made for the future of music and the future of art. But it is actually, and you're just gonna have to trust me on that. Okay, so that was the duration. Let's do the same for the scale degrees. So that's slider 2. Q, what did we call it? Deck, Q deck. And so we're gonna scale it from the same values as before, but instead of the value from the dir, we're gonna scale it from 1 to 7. So scale to bottom of the slider is the first scale degree, which is 0, and top is the 8th scale degree, which is 7, confusingly. And then we're gonna make another one here. Q amp. So this is the amplitude. We do not want this to be 7 because then our speakers will explode. We're gonna say the maximum amplitude is a reasonable 0.75. I think the default is 0.25 or something like that. So that's Q amp. And oops, let's actually put this. No, that's okay. I feel like putting this in the last slider, I have to say. So that was the last slider. And then what we need here is for the third slider to change the octave that we're in. Okay. Q oct, I guess we call it. Yeah. So this could go from 2 to the 7th octave. Let's say that's a reasonable value. What do I know? So this all looks good. I'm gonna for the degrees here, let's just for the sake of sanity here, say slider 1, change duration. Okay. Slider 2, change scale degree. Slider 3. Oh yeah, okay. Slider 3, change octave. And slider 4, change the amplitude. So this should now work. If I did my coding correctly, we now have a fully functioning GUI for this strange and perhaps a bit boring pattern that I just made. Let's see. Check the post window. We didn't get any errors when we evaluated that. Let's make this a bit more slim. And then say, okay, the moment of truth, start. Okay, stop. All right, that's pretty good. Start. And so this was the duration, the first slider. Yep. Okay. This was the scale. See, I already forgot this. This was the scale degree. Yeah. Whoop. Here we are. And this is the octave. And the last thing is the amplitude. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. So I immediately want to make this a bit more interesting. And there's two things that I want to do. I want to make sure that the scale degrees, that we're not just changing the scale degree with the slider, that's pretty boring. Instead, we wanted to change this random process that we had going before. So I'm back here in the slider to action, and I'm gonna change this from just the value that comes in to the object p white, which is random values between let's say 0 and then the value of our slider. So the slider for the degree now changes the range of the random notes that we're playing. And that's gonna be a lot nicer, at least to me, or more interesting to me to listen to, and I guess a bit more computer music-y. And so I said in the beginning that I didn't want to get too much into making this look like something not from a Minesweeper, but let's just to spice things up a bit. Let's change the colors of the objects that we have here. And instead of trusting some really nice designers, really nice color scales and color system, and imbued with this kind of meaning and that kind of meaning, all due respect, we are going to just add some random colors because we love randomness, because we're computer musicians. So for the sliders, I'm gonna change the color. Let's just actually open the help file here, search for color, knob color, nope, background, oh yeah, the background. So we're gonna copy this background, slider, background, underscore, and then color. That's the color object. And color has a method called rand, which will give you a random color, random RGB color, where the colors are randomly chosen between low and high. So those are the two parameters. So we're going to say color.rand between 0.25 and 0.9. For the button, let's look. So this is one of the issues. It's not really an issue, but things might not have the same name between different objects in the GUI. So let's just check and make sure that we are changing the... Oh yeah, that's true, yeah. So for the button, we need to put the color inside of the state. So the button can actually change color at each state. So this is another little thing that we put inside of this one state that we have on each button. So this is one state we call start, which has a random color assigned to it. And now I think things are gonna look just a tad bit more jazzy, and who knows, maybe it's gonna sound a bit more interesting as well with our newly added randomness. Oppa! Here we have something that looks a bit more interesting. So I see now that immediately that I made a mistake with the buttons for the GUI here. What I said here was the color of the text. We don't want to change the color of the text, so let's say color.black for text, and then color.rand for the background. And let's do the same for the start button here. Okay. Let's see if this works. Oh yeah. This is now looking, in my opinion, quite sassy. It's got all of these really nice colors, and it's able to play music. If I press start, oh yeah, let's just change this. The speed or the duration. Okay, how about the scale degree? Yeah. Yep. So that's the range of the randomness that we just assigned to the scale degree. And let's change the octave as well. Oh yeah. And the amplitude of our little pattern. Yes.